This episode is shot, produced, and brought to you by Redefine You Media. Redefine You offers on-demand video production and brand photography for companies of all sizes. They specialize in high-energy, dynamic production styles that will bring any event, promotion, or landing page to life. Book them for your next shoot and head over to redefineyou.com to schedule your discovery call today. You can mention the Casually Ambitious podcast for 15% off your first project together. That's Redefine You, REDEFINE, the letter U.com. Check them out. Welcome visionaries, dreamers, and trailblazers to the Casually Ambitious podcast. I'm your host, Chase Price, and I am thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Here, we dive deep into the realms of wellness, entrepreneurship, and mindset. Let's build a life we love while loving the life we live. The adventure to a more mindful, purposeful, and casually ambitious life starts now. Let's do it. Let's do it. So this has been a long time coming. Very excited to have you on. I think our relationship started probably 6 to 7 months ago, maybe now.
Yeah.
It's been a good while. Someone referred me to you, and I think it was Zach.
Yep.
And so I started getting treatment from you and everything, and we've developed a really tight friendship. So
yeah.
Very excited to be chatting with you today. Thanks for coming on.
Now. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm excited. Nervous.
Don't be nervous.
All the things.
We have a conversation like this every week. We're just going to chop it up like we always do. So I'd like to start with you giving a little bit of a background. So you're a college athlete. Mm-hmm. You went to Cuse, you played lacrosse, all these things. So kind of walk me through your collegiate career that kind of led to going into being a chiropractor and how that kind of came to be.
Cool. So started off at Niagara University. Played, it was like a lower level Division I school. So I played soccer and lacrosse there actually for a little over a year. And then I decided to transfer to Syracuse. Just played lacrosse there. Finished my basically collegiate career there. And we, I might be a little biased, but we really had such a phenomenal team and so many talented athletes when I was there. And it was just a really phenomenal opportunity for me to grow in. A space that I was extremely uncomfortable when I transferred, because you go to a school like Niagara who also had amazing athletes, but then you transfer to Syracuse and everyone is fast. Everyone has stick skills. They're faster than you. They're stronger than you, like everything. So it was definitely a mental challenge. It was like going
from JV to varsity, basically.
Yeah, like big time. Like I remember like the first day we did sprints. And when we were on the line, like I was used to like kind of being up in the front, and I start running. I'm like, holy crap. Girls are quick. Like they got some speed to them.
Yeah.
So finished out my career there, graduated in 2015, which was a phenomenal season for us. We were I'm like, oh my gosh, or maybe 2014 ACC champions, which was awesome. And then I got to be a part of 2 NCAA. We unfortunately did not win, but it was just such a phenomenal experience getting to play with people at that level. Mm-hmm. And it's really, really cool to see. Fun fact, one of my teammates, Kayla Trainer, she's actually the head coach for Syracuse lacrosse now.
Sick.
So it's just really, really cool to see. I mean, we have so many other athletes that I played with who are still in that community. And it's just special that women of that talent are still touching and playing a part of people's lives. So after I graduated in 2015, I actually did kind of like reverted and did a year of semi-pro soccer, or I guess I should say summer. And then from then on, I was kind of like, I don't know if I really had a future at that point in time in, professional sports. Everybody wants to be there, but it's a grind. Mm-hmm. I took a strength and conditioning job at Castleton, Vermont, which was like a Division III school in Vermont, obviously very, very small town. But to this day, that year that I was there was one of the most transformable years of my life. I met one of my best friends, Jamie Trayer. She is still my best friend to this day. And I really learned what I didn't want to do. And I think people sometimes are like, what do you mean? But I always say you learn the most in the trenches. And it was a challenging year for me. And that's what kind of led me into, I started to shadow some like PTs and PAs and chiros. And throughout like a crazy scenario, I found my boss, Josh, in actually Carolina Sports Clinic and shadowed there and never left. So I've been with the company for like 7 years now in many different ways.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So coming from that background, I feel like a lot of people who transition into like chiro positions, acupuncture positions, whatever, previous athletes, a lot of them are. Talk to me about that transition. Like, it's tough when you play college sports and you always dream about like you're just going to figure out a way to keep playing, professional, semi-pro, whatever it is. And then that realization of like, I'm just not there. Like it probably hits you like a ton of bricks when it finally hits you. And you kind of in the back of your head know it for a long time, but then it kind of is a huge realization where maybe a coach or somebody tells you straight up like, hey, this is probably the end of the road. How did you take that at first? And then did you use that kind of as fuel moving forward into your next position or whatever it was?
It was really hard. Something that I would like to maybe get into in the future in my career is helping collegiate athletes
Transition.
make that transition, because when something defines you for so long and is such, you wake up every day, you put on your cleats, you're going to practice. I just had this conversation last night. I met we went to Great Wagon Road. It's like a distillery or whatever. And I met a really successful woman there, and we were just chopping it up. And I was like, I look back at my college career and all I remember is sports. Like, I don't even remember going to school. So it's hard to really make that realization. And especially, I'm just going to say it's written on the wall, but for women in general too, it's even that much harder. Right. So there's definitely a period of not knowing who you are, not knowing where you belong. And I thought that maybe if I wasn't a professional athlete, maybe that I could become like a strength and conditioning coach, because that was like my first job, which I loved. But after doing it for a year, it was really, really hard. And I was like, I don't know if this is for me. So that's when I was like, well, maybe then I can treat professional athletes. And in this crazy kind of roundabout way, you keep, I think I want to do this, and you try to do it and you're unsuccessful, and maybe I want to do this, and then you're unsuccessful. But I feel like that's really the foundation to kind of putting you in a direction of where you're really supposed to be. So that's what really led me to chiropractic school. And my boss, Josh, played a huge role in that, because once I met him and saw how much he cared about his patients, I'm like, this is actually what I want to do. I want to give somebody, if I couldn't have that chance, I want to make somebody have the ability to play for as long, as hard, as good as they can. And if I have that opportunity for one day in my life, then it maybe might make me feel like just as good. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what like rolled me into that. I still play though. I play like co-ed, Yeah. Never giving up the dream.
No, never. Keep it going as long as you can. So this is maybe a hot button topic, but I'm curious. So people are oftentimes, I've heard people say like, chiros aren't doctors, this thing of like you didn't go to 8, 9, 10, 12 years of medical school, whatever. What exactly is the certification, like amount of time of school? I'm totally ignorant to this, so I don't know how much education is needed, but like what is the process to become a chiro?
Great question. I love this question. I love a good challenge. So you go to undergrad, so 4 years, some might have 3. There are, I think, programs now that are doing like kind of like what physical therapy does as well, that it's like a 3+3 or like a 3+4. I'm not sure, because it has changed a lot where I was. So I'll just kind of give you my path. I went to undergrad. I did a year in my master's program in Vermont, Castleton, Vermont. And then it's a 3-year, 8-month program, 15 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So I was in school all year round for 3 years and 8 months. I'm really transparent about this. I graduated in 4 years. I ended up modifying. I struggled with some classes, and it was humbling for me. I had to you're taking 32 credits a trimester. That is a full year's worth in 15 weeks.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really, really hard.
I think in my semesters, I used to take like 12 to 15 hours.
Yeah. And so imagine when like finals weeks comes, there's some days where we took 3 to 4 exams in one singular day. So it's about 4 years. And then during that 4 years after your undergrad, of course, it's about 1.5 years of what we call clinicals. So you get your white coat, you're pronounced as a doctor, and then you start treating patients as a doctor, but you are working under a licensed physician. Okay. So you start at the school and you do that for 15 weeks, and then you go out into basically either like a preceptorship or a clinical. So you could decide to stay at your school. You could decide to, there was 3 locations. So we had New York Chiropractic College, which is now known as, I think, like Northeastern Health Sciences. You could go to Buffalo, which is where I went, Rochester, or New York City in Levittown. So my boss went to Levittown. I ended up going to Buffalo. And then after that, you're graduating, and then obviously there's 5 parts of boards, which a lot of people don't know about, that are like really, really expensive, really vigorous. And then whatever state you practice in, you have to take your jurisprudence exam. So it's a really long road. To kind of circle back on your question, when people are like, you're not really a doctor, our base level education is actually like, if you put our like medical credit hours and like anatomy and like diagnosing and physiology, it's actually the exact same amount as a medical doctor. The biggest difference is the residency. So, they do 4 or 5 years. They could even do 8 years of residency. But we have the ability to diagnose. So we have to take the neurology, the pathology, the biochem, the physics. It's a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't realize we study.
Sure.
Yeah.
So one thing I really want to get deep on today is prevention, maintenance for running in particular, because that's what I'm interested in, and I think a lot of the listeners as well. But before we get into that, I'm curious, what is your favorite type of patient to treat? Like, just generally speaking, is it a certain sport that they play, or is it a mentality that they come into their PT with, or who do you prefer to treat, and what like lights you up inside when you're doing your job?
Oh, that's a great question. I obviously love treating you, but I have treated this woman. Her name's Mary Austin. I've treated her for 2.5 years. I don't know what it is about her, but as soon as my hands touch her body, like some magic happens. And I don't know what it is. I think it's just really, I'm comfortable. She allows me to do what I need to do. So it's always a challenge when patients come in. I like to change the tissue. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to give it a little sauce. You might feel a little spicy when you come out, Yeah. But I love... confirm. Yeah, exactly. You got to make change to the tissue, But I like a patient who, one is like, I'm in your world. So do what you need to do for me, and the world is your oyster, because it doesn't give me any boundaries. I can needle them, I can cup them, I can grasp them, I can stretch them, I can adjust them, I can do whatever. And it allows me to be really, really creative. Another type of patient I like to treat is someone who might have been already going to like I hate the terminology, but we might call it like a rack and crack chiro, where you just go, they get adjusted, and they go on their way. Because I put them on the table and they're like, oh my gosh, I've never had something like that. So it varies, because I really hold all my patients like near and dear to my heart, and not one is the same. So I've, of course, adored treating you because I do feel like we've become so close. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Sometimes it's like we like just our chit chat sessions more than the actual therapy, but it's really special when I treat someone like you or some of my other patients who they leave my room and I feel like my cup got filled. And that's just like so, it's really special and an honor and a blessing to be able to do that. So those are the types of patients that I like. However, I also love a challenge. So when someone comes in and is like, I don't want to get adjusted, I don't want to get needled, I'm like, okay, how can I peel back their layers, their little onion layers, and get towards the center to let them allow me to really take over and do what I need to do. Mm-hmm. So
I'm glad you brought up the, what do y'all call it, rack and crack?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Because that's what I used to think of when I would hear the word chiropractor. I would think I'm going to go lay on the table. I'm going to go deep breath in, 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
and and that's really all it is. But like, there's many times when I'll come visit you and we don't do any kind of adjustments.
Yeah.
And so I do want to clarify on like, when I characterize you, I don't want to say PT because you are certified like in chiro and acupuncture and these other things, but like you're not just chiropractor, right? So talk to me about that and like the stigma behind just being a chiropractor. Just being a chiropractor, does that mean I'm certified in this one thing about, adjustments on the body, or there's a much more layers to that as well?
Yeah, so I think, kind of both to what you said. You have your traditional chiropractors who that's what they want to do. And let me just clarify too, like some of those doctors are the best at adjusting because it's what they do every single day.
Right.
And they are phenomenal at what they do.
Right.
And the power of an adjustment itself is one of the key points to healing somebody. So just a little bit on that realm. With what we do, and I think it's a reason why I fell in love with Carolina Sports Clinic is because you're not in a box. Like when I saw Josh treat for the first time, I'm like, what are you? This is amazing. Like, I want to do more. And it was just something that I was immediately like drawn into. Being able to do soft tissue, cupping, needling, all that stuff. And then like you said, you don't want to call us a physical therapy. So we do have physical therapists at our office who are freaking amazing. They level up. In my perfect world, every single one of my patients would see our physical therapist because they're good. And not only are you addressing your biomechanics, but you're addressing the tissue too. Right? So there's different things. Like I went and got my contemporary medical acupuncture through McMaster. So that was completely separate than my chiropractic degree. Soft tissue, I would have to say I learned from Josh. Yeah. And then there's grasping courses, cupping courses. So basically the cool thing about our career, it's as niched as you want it to be. If you just want to adjust, you can do that. If you want to adjust to soft tissue and everything else, you can do that too. So it's cool because you're not really boxed in. It's not like you're a surgeon and all you're doing is surgery. So it's really what you make of it and what you want to put your kind of special little secret sauce on it.
But that's very unique to the clinic, right? Because there's plenty of clinics that are like, hey, you do this, stop trying to do everything.
Yes. So I'm glad you said that because my boss actually gave me, and he's going to kill me because he hates that I use the term boss, but he's the captain of the ship. So I have to say it. But he challenged me. And he was like, I want you to go out and try to find a clinic like ours. And when I'm saying I drove across country, DC, Nashville, Denver, Wisconsin, Texas, you name it. I went everywhere and did not find a singular clinic that embodied what Josh does and his morals at our clinic. I didn't find it anywhere. So that was kind of like my drawback every time. I was like, I like what you guys do, but Because throughout the interview process and when you're trying to find where you want to work, there was a lot of it is like, I want you to show up at this time. I want you to do this. There was one company, they had an actual training course that you had to go through, and you don't go outside the lines. Like, you are in this little box. And I loved the people I met there, but I just didn't see how I could really progress. I'm super creative. So I like to do some weird stuff and like, maybe this will work, maybe this won't work. Like, you know what I mean? That's right. The fun of it.
Yes. And that's the beauty of finding somebody that, like me, for example, finding you, and then we come back on a weekly basis and say like, hey, that was phenomenal. Let's try that again. Or, hey, that didn't really work, but there's potential. So let's switch it up or do whatever it is. So I like that you can like kind of steer the ship for me and let me decide like that really is where I think is doing the best work for me, or maybe we need to pump the brakes on that and backtrack.
100%. And I will say it's a humbling career, man. I mean, my first year in my practice, you know, there's sometimes you're just not going to get people better. And you have two choices. You can either let it bruise your ego, or like, how can I either adapt my practice, or are you man or woman enough to refer them in-house to another doctor and they can do their job and make them better? Because in my head, and everybody might not feel this way, but if one of my patients goes and sees, I'll just say like Zach Ratliff, he's a great doc, he's at our office, and he makes them better, heck yeah. Like, sayonara, I'll see you when I see you. If you need me, I'm here. You know, but it took me a really long time to get to that point of my career, and I'm still learning to be okay with that. Mm-hmm. I think that when you hold on so tightly to something that's not supposed to be there, that's when you start to get those rocky waters. You know, you really have to allow yourself to step back and be like, I took an oath to make my patients better. And if my patient is getting better with Zach, Andy, Chelsea, or Gage, and I'm just naming people who are at our South Park clinic, like we have so many other phenomenal docs at our Blakeney location as well. But if they're getting better with them, I gotta be okay with that. And it's hard, but it's really important. And I'm still learning and growing. It's gonna take time.
It goes back to your competitive nature.
Exactly.
For sure.
It's hard, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing in sports. It's like the ego can kill a team if you can't, you know, push it back down and be a team player. It's the same thing in career.
Yeah.
So.
And something I love, Josh and I talk about a lot. So when you're handling a basketball, right, you want to get better at your skills. If you ain't losing the ball, you're not working hard enough, because that's where you get better. Like, if you're not pushing the envelope, you're never going to get better at that skill. And then another thing we're big on analogies here. So even when you're a captain of the team, you don't play every position. You might have that captain and you like little C on your chest, and you might be chosen to lead, but that does not mean that you're good at defense, goalie, midfield, and striker. It just means that you serve a purpose, and when you can't serve that purpose anymore, you pass the ball.
Yeah.
And put it in your teammates' hands. So that's...
You're a facilitator.
Yeah,
You're the lead facilitator. There's trust in you to make the right decision and put the right people in the right places.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
Which is huge. What are some things that you guys do to kind of push the envelope a little bit? Like, what are some unique treatments and things? Like, we've tried some crazy stuff before. I'm going to space on what it was called, but it was like you were on some board, I was on some board, and it was like electromagnetic
Electrons
things.
Plus.
Electrons Plus.
That thing
So talk me through
crazy.
Electrons Plus. Like, what is that? What was that doing exactly?
Okay. So, that thing is the craziest thing, and I'm still getting used to it. So, it's basically like this big box that sends current through my body into yours.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
as I'm doing soft tissue, like, he's getting almost these like vibrational kind of sensation through it. So, and I'm like sue me if I butcher this explanation. So whatever, I'll just say it how I believe it in my head.
Yeah.
But you're putting a lot of like neuroreceptors through me into you, and you're kind of trying to like re-educate where all those neuroreceptors are going. You're almost like revamping the tissue, like putting like a shock to the tissue. Like when you go on cryo, they say you're basically bringing your body down to like that homeostasis spot, and then you're going to leave and you're like revamped, right? It's the same type of thing, but it's crazy because it's actually one of the, and again, I might be lying when I say this, it's one of the only therapies that like I also get benefit giving it. So when I'm done,
that's crazy.
I feel like I took like a shot of espresso. I'm like, woo, let's go. I'm ready. But it's also really challenging to give because sometimes I'm doing that for like an hour and you're wiped after.
Sure.
Like it's a crazy thing. Like if I take my hand off or I take that foot off my pad, I'm getting shocked.
Yeah.
So
and
like,
you're like, don't touch metal. Don't touch anything.
Don't
like
touch
just
metal.
stay there.
Yeah, just
and
chill.
let it happen.
And I've touched metal before. It doesn't feel good.
I bet
it doesn't
it's
feel
probably
good.
like an electric fence, like shock tape.
Yeah.
Thing, or a dog collar shock. I really enjoyed that one. And to break it down even further for people who maybe haven't experienced any type of chiro work or physical therapy or like anything that we're talking about, soft tissue. Can you just explain what soft tissue is?
Yeah, so obviously everyone's familiar with like the term massage therapy. So we have different layers of like the tissue of your skin. You have your superficial layer, you have your fascia, you have your fat layer, and then you have your muscle layer. So when you're going in and doing manual therapy to the tissue, what you're trying to do is change how the tissue is almost like layered in a way. When you get those adhesive and those like kind of bumps, it's because, and again, in my head, if I don't say this correctly, it is what it is. I operate a little, maybe more layman's terms than most docs. Sure. Not afraid to admit that. But the fascia just isn't moving the way we want it to move. So your fascia should move like this. And then when you get those kind of like adhesive kind of bumps, and it starts to go like this, and then when it glides, it can't glide. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing soft tissue, you're actually like almost changing like the lymph drainage, because we also have like lymphatic channels like in our body, and we're trying to just make the river flow better, put blood flow to the tissue, change the tissue. Like it's a loaded question because you can go soft tissue, you can do like medium, you can do deep pressure. There's a lot of there's micro conditioning where you're just kind of like doing this like on top of the tissue in between fascial layers. There's a lot of soft tissue is such a vague term, so it can go a lot of ways.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But essentially what you're trying to do is rejuvenate the tissue below. Mm-hmm. And you're opening up gas lines, so to speak. I've heard that term. It's just like it's something's jammed up, something's closed off, and you're trying to open it up a little bit more. Let's move to acupuncture, which is one of my favorite things that you do, and not just acupuncture, but acupuncture with stem. So that's one of my personal favorites, and that's what we've been actually working on with my little hip, whatever I got going on lately. Talk to me about that. So first, let's talk about acupuncture and your mindset and thought process when administering acupuncture. Like, when is it right for somebody? When is it not? And then also including stem on top of that and saying, okay, this is a good first step, but let's add the stem and try to get things moving a little bit more.
Absolutely. So I'll kind of just like start with like a baseline education. We have dry needling, we have neurofunctional acupuncture, then you have your traditional Chinese medicine acupuncture.
What's the difference between dry needling and acupuncture?
Oh, such a loaded question. I knew you were going to ask that. So dry needling is, I would say, more of like a newer term. It's been around for a while, but it's really specifically towards like a certain technique of needling. They do a lot of like pistoning, which you kind of come in and out of the tissue. You might like put a needle in, move it, piston another area. Really kind of focused on fascial points, muscle points. That, what I like to say, is maybe like a little more local focal, but you're still going really deep. Your traditional Chinese acupuncture, and again, this is such a loaded question because not every acupuncturist treats the same. For just the sake of definition, acupuncture and neurofunctional acupuncture is educated not on the same level, because you need like 3,000 hours to be a licensed acupuncturist. So that's a lot. I think I only have 400, maybe 500 at this point, but it's a lot of hours. And they are trained in meridian lines, which we are too, but they're also trained in like reading tongue, like your like tongue lines. Like it's crazy. Like you go in, I've been to one before. You go in, you stick out your tongue. They do such an integrative, like deep in depth. It's crazy because they tap into your sympathetic, your parasympathetic, and not that you're not doing that with dry needling or neurofunctional, but it's just a very different type of style. Now, like kind of rolling into the neurofunctional acupuncture, and dry needling also use stim on the needle as well. But I took the course at McMaster University. It was about like a 6-month course. You go like every 2 weeks, Friday through Sunday, a lot of hours. You're getting, PowerPoint hours. You start with needling yourself, but we are still trained on meridian lines. So,
meaning what?
So each visceral like part of your body, which is like your organs, has a line. So like governor vessel is like the center point, and that's like directly down the center of your body. And then you have like your liver, and then you have your spleen. So it's literally lines. Like if I were to pull up a picture and I stand in like anatomical position, there's like sections.
Just a bunch of little lines. Yeah. Okay.
It's crazy. And every single point has a different name. So that's where it gets, like Shenmen is one of my favorites. It's in the ear. So that's kind of like your Zen point. But now that's where you're kind of mixed in a little bit of the new acu with the old school. Which is why I love practicing in the time I'm in, because there's really no limits. So that's kind of like a synopsis of all three. When you're doing functional acupuncture, we have our sympathetic and our parasympathetic. Our sympathetic is our fight or flight, and our parasympathetic is our rest and digest. We as a society are in this like fight or flight all the time. When we administer any sort of needling, we are going all the way down to that neuromuscular junction of the muscle, fascial point, maybe the segmental point, the nerve point. We're going to that like the center of that. So like just where that pain or the good feeling generates, that's where we're trying to go into. We want to down regulate our sympathetic and up regulate our parasympathetic. So we want to put our body into a state where we can rest and digest, and that way the tissue heals. We're also trying to put the train back on the track. So this is how I kind of explain it to my patients. When you have an injury, we have nociception, which is pain. So all these receptors coming in like this. It's like sparking like this. Then we start to needle. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to grab all these different receptors and focus them into the train track. Because right now your train is derailed. Okay? So that's why a lot of times when I needle you, you're like, remember when your foot hurt and I like started all the way up here and I went all the way down? That meridian line starts, really up here, but it goes all the way down to your foot. Is it a foot problem? Or is it a knee problem? Or is it a hip problem? Or is it a back problem?
Yeah.
So that's where it gets a little dicey.
When you're asking me, when you're needling me, when I react and I have like a little like a wince or something, you ask, is it achy? Or is
pinchy
it
or nervy?
Pinchy
yep.
Or nervy? Why are you asking that? What does that mean?
Okay, so when I said this career is humbling, I freaking mean it. Everybody's anatomical structure is different. So when I say that, it just means we have an anatomical position of your body. Our muscles are supposed to be in a certain area, right? I'm different than you. You're different than your wife, Darian, or anybody else we treat, right? You can be a millimeter off of where an acupuncture point is supposed to be, and it will feel different. And it is the most frustrating thing in the entire world. So when I communicate with my patients, I'm like, when you feel that deep, dull ache, that's the money spot. When you feel kind of a pinch shock, electricity, I could be a little too close to a nerve. We have a lot of superficial vessels. I could hit a vessel. And it's not like end all be all. There's obviously areas that you don't want to hit, but I just move the needle to be comfortable for you. So when I decide to needle someone or not, it's really based on the patient. If you're comfortable with it, I'm going to do it. I might start, I think when I first needled you, I didn't do stim, right? I think I started just with
I think so.
needles. Just a little intro. I want you to come back.
I think it was needles and the heat gun.
Oh yeah, the laser. That's a whole nother thing. But that, I mean, yeah, you want to make the patient as comfortable as they are, because I am putting a foreign object into your body. It's a weird feeling. Like it really is. So, and sometimes people don't understand how to compartmentalize what they're feeling.
Right.
Because it's weird. And a lot of people say that.
Because you've never experienced anything like it. So it's hard to describe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Let's transition a little bit to athletes in general, and people that are, actively pursuing athletic endeavors, whether it's a marathon or whether they play sports, more, contact sports, whatever it is. What are some of the keys that they need to keep in mind in order to, ideally you want to reach the person before they get to you and get a message out to them of like, these are kind of the things that you should keep in mind. These are the things you should be working on by yourself. Like you've always preached to me, and I've heard this from other sources as well, like 50% physical training, 50% recovery. It should be half and half. That's the golden ratio, which is very, very hard to accomplish. But the best of the best, the Christian McCaffreys, the absolute animals, are doing that. So what is the message that you would send to the people who, hey, obviously if you're hurt, you're injured, come to us. We want to take care of you. But let's start being smart and doing these things prior in order to just maintain. And, if you're in uncharted territory, it's inevitable that these things are going to happen, right? Like for me now, I'm running ridiculous miles, like 100-miler, for example. Like things are going to happen. But what are the things that you preach to kind of keep in mind for athletes to maintain themselves before having to come into the clinic and see you?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head there. When you're working with elite athletes, you always wonder how they get there. I myself wanted to get there at a certain point. I think the reason why I chose this path is I myself have dealt with a lot of injuries. I think that if I was smarter, I would have gone a lot farther in my career. Also, it's such a blessing because now in 2023, we have so much stuff that we didn't have back in the day. Like I saw Chiron stuff, but it's not like I was getting needling and I went to Tom Janik was like my first physical therapist, and he got me through a lot because like ankles, all that stuff. But everyone always asks, what's the secret? What made you level up? It's because those athletes put in their head, if I am waking up every single morning and putting this much effort onto the field and this much effort into my skill, I need to be proactive in my recovery instead of reactive, and that's where a lot of prevention has. Again, you're in a position where you are pushing your body to limits that you're already surpassing many other people by what you do. Being a college athlete, you're it's like the top 5% in the country or even can make that next step, which a lot of people forget. Mm-hmm. So you're already in some really uncharted territory, water, and it can kind of be confusing. So when you decide to dedicate your time to rehab, I think that's where the Christians, the Gregs, the D'Angelos, the, the Callahans, the Mike Hartmans. That's why they got so successful, because they're like, well, shit, I got to take care of myself too, because there's no way that you'd last if you're not doing anything for yourself. It would just be like going a whole day without drinking water. You have to replenish the tissue. You got to, or else you're on E.
It's kind of obvious if you're in deep with it, but if you're not, if you're on the outside looking in, it's like, like you said, it's uncharted territory. Like, you just don't know. But once you know, it's kind of inexplicable not to do the things, because that is, obviously there's work ethic, but like the other side of it's the recovery. That's the differentiator from the good to the great, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it's just really important, because especially someone like you who's running, I mean, how many miles a week are you running right now?
About to touch 100 this week.
That's a lot. And that in a week. You're saying 100 in a week. Some people run 100 in a month. So now you're bringing your body to really a whole nother level that people don't even know. Because now you're just trying to focus on, is my machine working the way I need it to? Because if it doesn't, you're not going to hit those miles, which means you're not going to hit your training, which means that when that ultra marathon comes around, it's going to be a hell of a lot harder if you didn't do any rehab. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, that's where like, you're almost like, it's inevitable. Like, if I don't do this, I mean, you're almost destined to fail. And I'm not saying that to be mean or whatever, but you're writing your own path. You're giving yourself a direction of kind of here when you're trying to get here. So instead of being resistant on it, why don't you just come up here and train with the greats? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, once you figure out what the secret is, like, take advantage. And that's one, but it's not really a secret. It's like, it's just more time and more effort, and the work ethic it goes into that as well. It's not just on the field. It's like the extra, because nobody wants to really go to PT. I do, because I enjoy our conversations, but like, nobody really wants to spend an hour drive to the clinic and like go do the things that they got to do, but it's so important. So that's a cool thing to touch on too. And like, realistically, for my 244 marathon, like, I don't think that would have been possible if I wasn't coming to see you every single week.
No.
Because even though I wasn't having anything I was really fighting through, I think that's because I was being proactive, right? And taking care of those things. And if something would even bother me a little bit, I'd say, hey, hamstring. You'd be like, all right, let's hammer it out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't becoming a recurring issue.
Yeah.
You know?
And then something too I want to highlight on, which you're really, really good at, which is so important that people put to the wayside, is your mentality. What are you doing for this? Are you taking time for yourself? Are you, listening to podcasts, doing yoga, whatever? I am telling you, and people might laugh when I say this, I think the one thing that held me back from leveling up was not taking care of my mental health. It really held me back for a very, very long time in my life, in my career, in my relationships. I recently in January started seeing a therapist, Dr. Dan Stillwell. He's amazing. And I had no idea how much that would not only just change here, but change my career, change my friendships, change my marriage, because people don't think about that. They're like, oh, well, if my body's fine, then I can run whatever. But like, we've talked about this. You really think that race was like 100% physical? No. When you're going downhill at a 6-minute whatever pace, that's mental. How'd you overcome that? What did you do that you were like, okay, like I gotta push? Because that's like, I really have to argue that's like 95% of it. And I'm telling you now, the athletes who have tapped in and really reached that different level of their brain, it's because they care about their mental health as well.
When you talk about taking care of your mental health, do you primarily mean just speaking with someone a licensed person, or do you mean like there's other ways as well to do that?
So many other ways. And I'm so glad that you asked this because, I can highlight this a little bit because where I kind of started to become, I would say, more athletic. I was a college athlete already, but when I really, really started to dial in, because fun fact, I'm going to say it, Q's told me I wasn't good enough to play there. It was a bummer. It was an ego. I was like, they were like, nah, you're not good enough. And somehow I like weaseled my way in there. But I was going through a lot of stuff and I was like, okay, I was drinking a lot. I was eating like shit. I was not sleeping. The list kind of goes on. And when I decided to, and I really, at this point, I didn't really have a therapist. And we talked about this the other week. I was like, okay, anytime I'm starting to feel sad or upset, I'm going to work out. There are times like my dad has a gym above his, he owns a flooring company in Endwell, New York. Endwell Rug Company has a gym up there. I would go there at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night and get a lift in and go back to sleep. And if I woke up feeling like junk the next day, I'd repeat. And honestly, that summer, I think, is what allowed me to transition to Syracuse because I really started to pay attention to the little things. I started to level up because my mental factor wasn't a point. So I'm talking meditate. I'm talking doing things like this, spending quality time with the people you surround yourself with. Man, I could talk all day about that.
It's huge.
It's huge. And it's hard when people are in your life for a long time and you love them so deeply and you care about them and you just are starting to realize that maybe they don't serve the same purpose as they used to. You got to step away. And it's hard. Like I'm an empath. So like I love everyone really, really deeply. I want everybody to be my best friend. If you're hurting, I feel that. If my sister's hurting, I feel that. So trying to step back and say, you're not cutting off a relationship. You're just maybe choosing not to put as much effort into it. Because when you're consistently sucked dry, that will transform your career in a bad way. It might hurt your marriage, your relationships, your friendships. So I'm talking the yoga, the grabbing coffee, the journaling, the writing, doing stuff for you. And then most importantly, what I struggle with a lot is it's really hard. It's love, like really fully loving yourself. Mm-hmm. Because I love this. I say it all the time. When you walk into a room, the first thing you might want to do is judge someone. And I've challenged myself, and I would really like to challenge everybody else to replace judgment with curiosity. Instead of being like, oh, look at that, fit guy, he's probably got it all. Why don't I just go over and ask you some questions? How are you? Who are you? What do you like? If we just replace those things, I really think that that's when you start to untap that other level. And it not just transforms your mental health, but it transforms everything in your life. Finding your tribe, and we talked about this a lot. I feel like I'm starting to get there, and it's a good feeling. It's just a good feeling to be, a rising tide raises all ships. It's a good feeling to be there. So there's a lot of different things that you can do for mental health, and what I do might look different than what you do. Sure. But gosh, it's important.
Yeah. Start with curiosity. I love that so much. It reminds me of another thing that I try to do is go first. And this is hard for me because I'm introverted naturally, especially in social environments. I'm keep to myself for the most part, but it's very similar to the curiosity first. It's just the go first mentality of like, smile at somebody first down the street, or like go up and start the conversation with somebody first, or give somebody a compliment if you actually fuck with their shoes. You're like, damn, those are tight. And then you'd never know where it goes after you start that conversation, but there's so much power in going first because you're vulnerable, and that's the fear, right? Because you're like, I'm going to open up and say something to them and they're not going to say anything back, or they're going to reject me or whatever. But like, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? The worst case scenario is they don't respond, or they say something snipe or whatever, the best case scenario is you just started a new relationship. You never know where that connection could go.
Absolutely. Like, and that's the thing. That's the craziest thing. Like, it's so crazy because everywhere I go, I almost like try to make a friend. And just last night, like this guy came out, he was on a date, and it just kind of came out. I was like, I love that shirt. That's awesome. And he was like, wow, thanks. And then, he sat down with his date, and then I was going to the bathroom, and he's like, hey, I appreciated that. And then we started talking, figured out he was a doctor of osteopath, and like that could be a referral for me. You know what I mean? Like, if we just live in this clouded area where we just think our shit doesn't stink and we're better than everybody else, what good does that do for you? There's so many people who could influence your life or make your life better. Like, I met a new patient on an airplane 2 weeks ago. I mean, we were miserable. We were stuck on this hot airplane for an hour and a half, but he had just moved to Charlotte. Mm-hmm. He doesn't know anyone. He's a great guy. So we just started shooting the shit, and now I have a new patient. And I also love this one too. I met one of my very good friends. She's a newer friend of mine, Sarah. We were sitting at the same table at a wedding, and 2 weeks ago I was in Mexico celebrating her 30th. I mean, you just never know where those relationships are going to lead. I mean, it's kind of this, I met my husband playing basketball, and he was in Dallas and I was in New York, and here we are 6.5 years later. We just celebrated our anniversary. You guys just celebrated yours. Congrats. But it's just like, if I never did that, I would have never met my husband. Yeah, so it's like, unreal. Why not?
Unreal.
And also, it makes somebody feel comfortable, man. Yeah. Like, I just hate, like, if you're walking into a room of 30 people as an introvert, aren't you thanking your lucky stars if an extrovert comes up to you and you're like, woo, thank God, thanks for breaking the ice for me.
Absolutely.
You know?
Great point.
Yeah, like, it's just, we spend so much time judging other people, where I love meeting people. There's so many incredible people in this world who can really take your life to new heights. So don't hinder yourself for not starting a conversation. Just go first.
100%. The other thing that I told you that I struggle with, because we're just being vulnerable right now, is like spotlight syndrome. So I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's just basically social anxiety. You think everybody's looking at you, and in reality, it couldn't be further from the truth. Everybody's worried about themselves, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody cares what you're doing. But it's like in social environments, I just like feel like, just nervous because of that. But you're so right. And like, if you start the conversation, go first, like, right off the bat, the energy changes and you get more confident because you're like, okay, let's do this. Let's do the damn thing. And you kind of get out of that zone, that own mind state that you kind of put yourself in. So that is something I've been a lot better about. That was more so in college and in years when I didn't know exactly who I was. I struggled with that quite a bit. It's gotten much better, but I certainly still deal with social anxiety at weddings and stuff like that. But I will say also, not drinking has helped a lot with that. For a long time for me, that was a crutch. Like, I wanted to not drink for a long time, and it wasn't because I couldn't handle my alcohol or, anything like that. It was more so just because, like, my lifestyle, I was like kind of 90% of the way there anyway. And I'm like, at a wedding or something, I'd be like, I want to go dance with my wife. Like, maybe I want to be a little tipsy in order to do that. And to like grease the social, I forget what the terminology was, but basically just allow me to be a little bit more social outside my comfort zone. And I finally gave up alcohol, and wouldn't you know it, like, my social anxiety has gotten so much better, even though you think that you need to rely on this alcohol in order to fight through it, right? It's the thing that you think you need is what you need to release in order to find that clarity on the other side, which has taken me a long time to figure out.
It's hard. And I went through, I didn't drink for like 2 years in college, where you're like doing all this crazy stuff and like going out and whatever. I mean, there was a really long time where I did not touch a sip of alcohol because like I kind of felt the same way. And I get a lot of like I call it like anxiety the next day.
Me too.
And it is
too.
a freaking worst, man. Like when you wake up and your heart feels like, because you start thinking about things that happened like a week ago.
Right.
You're like, what's happening here? Like, I was like, I don't, I thought that conversation was over. Like, why are we doing that? So I'm not a huge drinker myself. I will go out and, drink socially. I did that last night. Like, knowing your limits is a lot. And I just, transparently, I'll say I woke up this morning and I felt anxious. And I was like talking to my husband on the way over here. I was like, I picked the wrong day to go and have a couple drinks, or I'm doing a podcast. I'm like, I'm normally not really I have had anxiety. I would say I struggled more with depression in the past. But when you're having that crutch and you're always relying on that, it's not really the authentic you, right? Like, yeah, maybe it might help break the barriers down, but why don't you break those down for yourself?
Yep.
So I'm with you on that. And there's nothing wrong with going out and having some drinks and letting loose and doing whatever you do, to each their own poison. But I think understanding limitations and seeing, I saw a lot of ugliness come out of me when alcohol was involved. I can trace back arguments I've had with my husband. Alcohol was involved. Like it's like the one factor. And I'm not perfect. I've done a lot of wrongs in my life, and allergies are just crushing me today, man. I'm sorry.
You're good.
But to be able to remove myself from it now and be able to be vulnerable and be like, you know what? I treated so-and-so wrong during this time of my life. They had no idea that I was going through depression. They had no idea that I might have been drinking during that. I mean, I was very, very reckless at a point in my life. And I really, to a point where like, I did not want to be here anymore. And I used to really not talk about that ever. Yesterday, I literally like 24 hours ago, I just woke up and I was feeling so good. And to be on the other side of it after 8 like very, very grueling years of my life, where some people, like Caroline's so outgoing and she's so fun and she's so funny all the time. Like they had no idea what was going on in here. So, and I will say alcohol played a huge role in that. And that's why my standpoint is where it is now. When you find that something that is maybe a poison in your life and you take it away, it allows you to open other doors. And like I said, it's not a bad thing to do it. You can, if you want to smoke weed, smoke weed. If you want to drink, drink. People might look at me and think I'm crazy, but that's their life and that's their choices that they're choosing. Yeah. Who are you to judge, right?
Right.
So, and we don't know the past. Some people might have a really bad experience with cannabis. Other people might have really bad experience with alcohol. So it's just trying to figure that out. And I could not agree with you more on that realm, because it's not a good feeling when you feel like that the next day.
No, or the next like 3 or 4 days. Sometimes with me, man, it would be a while. But it's allowed me to find out, continue the journey of figuring out who I am by not drinking alcohol anymore, which has been really interesting. I never expected that, but it's pretty cool. And if anybody out there has any questions about that, like I never had really a resource. There's plenty of people who are sober, but not because I never knew anybody who just did it as a lifestyle choice instead of like really because they like had a kind of a problem, I guess. It was like a big issue in their life. So if anybody out there is listening and wants to talk through it, I'd be happy to do that. It's been, I guess, like 6 or 8 months for me now, but it's been quite rejuvenating.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because like you're, I think a lot of people struggle with this. You're not alone in this, like the feelings that you have. There's hundreds of thousands of people who feel like that, or hundreds of thousands of people who have had mental health issues or stuff like that. So don't corner yourself. Don't back yourself into a corner, because I think vulnerability helps people get out of that. And I will say, if it wasn't for meeting some people who have fought that battle with myself, like the same with myself, it's heavy to say this, but there's a chance that I possibly could have not been here. And it's hard to admit, but I'm so transparent about it. It's something that, this is probably the biggest platform I've ever said anything on. But I think it's freeing when you can come out on the other side. And I've had a lot of people and friends in my life lose their lives to suicide, mental health issues, things like that. And I guess this is a good opportunity to just assure you and everybody else that you do have a purpose and you're meant to be here. And people like us are happy to talk to you about that. And that's like the cool thing about doing things like this.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. I'm so grateful that you're here. I got spoiled last week. We had Casey come in. I got to chat with Casey, who's my running coach. This week I got to talk to you, who is kind of the other side. So we're talking about the 50-50 golden partnership.
Yeah.
So back-to-back weeks. That was really cool for me to kind of talk through all that. We went through a lot of it. I feel like that was a good, not too in-depth and too technical, but a good kind of overlay of how you should be thinking about taking care of your body. Anything you kind of like to add that we didn't touch on, as far as maybe people again on the, I don't want to say ultra endurance side, but like the athletic side, that they're trying to just make sure they're living that balanced lifestyle that's healthy and also practicing that recovery aspect.
Absolutely. I know it can be scary to go in and just be like, hey, like I'm hurting and I need help with just your body and whatnot. And I can full-heartedly say that Carolina Sports Clinic, and of course there's many other phenomenal doctors and facilities here. My husband works at Integrative Chiropractic of Natural Medicine. They do an amazing job. My brother-in-law works at Love Chiropractic. There's we got iCryo, we have Invigorate. There's so many different areas and, places that you can better yourself. Don't be scared. When you come into Carolina Sports Clinic, CSC, we're here to make you part of your family and like our family, and we will guide you through every single part. So if there's something that you or somebody else is hesitant on, you don't have to be like, you don't have to be, if you don't want to get adjusted, that's fine. We won't adjust you. If you want to go to see a PT inside of a chiro, we'll send you to a PT. So I think just being open, just like we talked about with the mental health aspect, but not being afraid to just sign up and do it and put you first, right? Because that's really how you're going to level up. And I think a lot of people like to teeter that line of like, I really want to get here, but they don't know how to get there. Well, this is a perfect opportunity. Just like you said, you talked with Casey last week about training and how to level up there. This is a great opportunity to talk about how important just recovery, and then also obviously my shirt literally says it, movement is life. It's what gives us life. Everything in the world is moving. The more we move, the longer we live. So it's, as we're doing soft tissue, we're moving your joints, we're moving your tissue, we're moving everything. It's really special. So don't be scared. Come on in. Come see us. We're really cool. I'm a little biased, but we like to have fun.
Oh, yeah.
And again, if you have any questions, like ask Chase, ask me.
Yeah.
We're here.
I think that was a great way to close. Put you first. That's the mantra of the week.
Yes.
Put you first.
Put you first.
If people want to reach out to you, where should they find you?
Klein Fit, C-Line Fit on Instagram, or Carolina Sports Clinic Instagram, or carolinasportsclinic.com. That's where I'm at. I'm a little inconsistent on that realm. My buddy Chase is helping me. But yeah, if you have any questions, ask me, our staff. We're here for you, and we're ready to help you level up when you're ready. So let's push the envelope, and I want to see you lose that ball when you're dribbling, because that's really where you take the next step, and it's cool to be on the other side.
Love it. That's the pod. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.